You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Bupp has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Bupp.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. And our guest for this week's show is real estate attorney, private capital expert, and founder of Bootstrap Legal, Amy Wan. Now, Amy is the founder and chief legal hacker at Bootstrap Legal, which provides software to allow deal sponsors to draft their own syndication and fund documents. Previously, she was a partner at Trowbridge Sidoti, LLP, also known as crowdfundinglawyers.net, where she practiced crowdfunding and syndication law. As you guys know, we do have a real estate investment fund that is open to accredited investors. If you're someone that's seeking a passive investment with me and my team and have an interest in what we've got working, you can go to our website and download our investment prospectus. You can find it at sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. You get all the details on our partnership opportunities there, and also a scheduling link to schedule a call with us to chat about it in more detail. And lastly, guys, if you happen to be in the Tampa Bay area, again, I just mentioned we're based out of Clearwater, Florida. So if you're in town, whether for business or pleasure, whatever it might be, we love meeting with you. I mean, I probably once a week I have a lunch or a dinner or a breakfast or a coffee or a beer with someone that's passing through that has reached out through this podcast that just wants to stop by and say hi, maybe have questions about the mobile home park niche, or just maybe just wants to talk shop about real estate investing in general. Well, either way, I love meeting others that share the same passion that I do for the real estate business. And so if you're in town, let me know that you're coming, and I'll try to coordinate my schedule so we can get together. You can email me directly, kevin@kevinbupp.com, and we'll try to hook up, okay? So without further ado, guys, I'd like to welcome Amy Wan to the show. Amy, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited about your book. I'm going to put my name on that VIP wait list.
You should, yes. I'll make sure you get 2 copies, right?
Fantastic.
Well, fantastic, Amy. Well, I really appreciate you joining us in the show today. We're going to be covering some really exciting topics here. But before we dive into the meat and potatoes of it all, I'd really like you to take a few minutes and just tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself. You know, I gave you an introduction, but I'm sure that it didn't do you justice. So take a few minutes and fill in the blanks that I might have left out there, and just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I think on paper it looks like I've done all these things and all these accomplishments and stuff. But I think, for me at least, there's this underlying story or this underlying drive. So, I didn't go to law school to be a real estate syndication attorney. I went to law school to be a human rights attorney because I genuinely wanted to help people. And, I didn't end up going down that career track because I found out, human rights law is totally at the whim of a local dictator. And so I moved into looking at how money and law intersect instead, because I feel like you can really use money to provide for social good. And everything that I do today, the reason I started this company is because I feel like law and legal services has become this really, it's almost a luxury item. Only the super rich, individuals, really wealthy people and the powerful corporations can afford, top-notch legal services. But, I felt, what about the rest of us? And last year, I had a potential client reach out to me, another real estate podcasting influencer as well, and he said, "Hey, I have this small deal. It's only $300,000, and I want to do a syndication. How much is it going to cost?" And it didn't make sense for him, right? Any law firm was going to charge him minimum $10,000 to do that deal, because at the end of the day, it's all these humans sitting there doing a lot of paperwork. And I'm not, saying that attorneys don't have their place, but for small deals, I realized last year that there's literally nothing out there. And so everything that I've done has kind of culminated into this new company I started today, which is called Bootstrap Legal. And what we are doing is we're using artificial intelligence to create software and help smaller real estate syndicators, crowdfunders, smaller real estate private equity funds to sit there and draft their own documents. It'll still be reviewed by an attorney, but because we're cutting down on attorney time, we can really cut down on the cost. And I think when you help beginning syndicators or people doing small deals, and you're lowering the transaction cost, that helps our economy as a whole.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I can attest to the fact that it's incredibly expensive to put together a real estate syndication. And a lot of times it just doesn't make sense. When you'd mentioned, or the example you gave of that client of yours that had a $300,000 deal, if it's going to cost them $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000 to put together the necessary documents, that kills the returns in that deal more than likely. I mean, it wouldn't allow him to actually meet his probably investment metrics if he had to spend that much money just on the legal and paperwork alone to get the syndication put together. So that's quite interesting. And I've heard that story many different times. So I like your idea, and I like this software, Bootstrap Legal, and I haven't seen it yet myself, but we talked about it before, Amy, prior to even launching it. And it seems like an incredible service, and it seems like something that's in such high demand, especially, I want to talk about this for a second because this kind of ties into, the whole landscape of raising private capital for real estate. Number one, the real estate market's on fire, right? I mean, it's going crazy again. I almost have a little bit of deja vu of like 2004, 2005, 2006, because it's just every major market is just, it's on fire and things are selling above asking price and everyone's doing transactions and things are good, right? That means that there's a lot of money changing hands. There's lots of capital changing hands and lots of capital being raised. And there's been a lot of changes, regulatory changes over the past, I guess, like 6 years or so regarding raising private capital. And so can you talk to that a little bit about, the Jobs Act and the SAFE Act and, crowdfunding and all that kind of stuff and how that applies to real estate and how things have changed really for the better? Especially for us smaller investors that might not have a huge, deep network of people that have tens of millions of dollars and want to throw it our way, right? We're getting our start. So speak about that a little bit, if you would.
Sure. So basically, the landscape really started changing about 5 years ago. So traditionally, unless you were going to publicly register as a company and go through the whole IPO process and be public, really one of the only other ways to raise capital nationwide was this thing called Regulation D, Rule 506. Now, Rule 506 is still around, but it's changed a little bit, right? So basically, in 2012, President Obama signed into law the Jobs Act, or and basically, there's not one new law. There are actually a couple, and the most frequent question I get is, well, when do I use which? And that's an art. That really comes down to what your goals are, how much you're trying to raise, and what's your strategy. So the old rule has now since become something known as 506B, as in boy, and basically says you can raise as much as you want, but you cannot advertise. In legalese, we say generally solicit. That's the same thing as advertising, right? And you can only have up to 35 non-accredited investors. Everyone else has to be accredited. So that was the old rule. Now the new rule is something called 506C, as in cat, and it basically says, look, we're still going to let you raise as much money as you want, but Rule 506C is accredited crowdfunding or rich people crowdfunding. So that means, you can go out and raise as much as you want, but it's from rich people or accredited investors only. So, what does that mean? That means, there are technical definitions about, what the SEC defines as a rich person that, we can get into if you really want. But the most amazing thing about this regulation is that it allows you to do what I actually see people do on LinkedIn every single day, which is openly talk about their deal, right? So now you can say, hey, I'm raising $5 million on this property. You can post it on LinkedIn and Twitter and your Facebook. You can plaster walls with it. You can go to your local RIA or meetup and announce it to the entire room, right? You are now allowed to actually advertise about it. But what I say to, I guess all my former clients and now users is this. What the SEC giveth, the SEC taketh away. So with each one of these rules, the SEC is going to make you pay some sort of price for having the freedom to either go to non-accredited investors or advertise. And in the case of 5/6C, the price that you have to pay is that you have to actually verify that these investors are as rich as they say they are, right? The next rule that came out is called Regulation A+. It basically revamped an old rule, the old Reg A that was basically not being used because it was way too hard. So under Reg A+, you can raise up to $50 million every 12 months. And the amazing thing about it is that, A, you can advertise, and B, you can take money from non-accredited investors. But because what the SEC giveth, the SEC taketh away, they're going to make you go through a process. They're going to make you pay a price, right? And that price is that you have to actually get your offering qualified by the SEC. So it's not a full-on registration where you spend like $3 million like you would if you were going public, but Reg A Plus really is like a mini IPO. You should be at that point where you're pretty sophisticated. You've got a team behind you. You've got your ducks in a row because you might have to do an audit. It's going to take 4 to 6 months generally to get your offering approved, or we say qualified by the SEC. So there is a waiting time. It's not like the previous two I talked about where it's like you just go and you tell the SEC, you just notify the SEC after you've raised money, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a bit of a waiting period, and it does tend to cost a little bit more, and they do want to see some more transparency. Now, the third and final rule that is actually only about a year old now is what everyone has called equity crowdfunding or investment crowdfunding. So that's regulation crowdfunding, or Reg CF for short. It really is for more early stage companies or smaller transactions, because you can only raise up to $1 million every 12 months, but you can raise it from the crowd, and you can advertise within reason. There's, I'll say you can advertise with an asterisk or some caveat, right? But the other thing that people should know about Reg CF, because I think a lot of real estate people, they hear it, they feel discouraged. They're like, oh, you can't do that much with $1 million, right? Is that what you can do is you can do what we call a concurrent offering, or what Seed Invest calls a side-by-side offering, which is you can mix and match your regulations. So maybe for one part of the capital stack, you raise $1 million under Reg CF from non-accredited investors. Maybe from another part of the capital stack, you do a 5/6B or a 5/6C, and you can raise, the rest of whatever you really need. So there is room, there is flexibility to mix and match. At the end of the day, what I would say to folks who are thinking about, raising capital from private investors is, there's no one-size-fits-all strategy. There's no one-size-fits-all regulation. So you should definitely talk to your attorney or whoever who knows about the regulations to figure out what's going to be the best strategy to get you to where you want to go.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things you had mentioned about the general solicitation, how the Reg D 506C version of it allows you to generally solicit. You gave a few examples, and actually in the beginning of the show, I literally generally solicited our fund through our mobile home park investment fund. So it's a beautiful thing because you can yell it to the world, and it's the one caveat is that they have to be accredited in order to be qualified, and they have to go through the verification process on the back end, which isn't that big of a deal. We use a third-party company called Verify Investor. It's really not that big of a deal whatsoever, but it is an extra step. And the one question I did have about the A+ offering, what you mentioned that it is more expensive, but give me an idea. Like if a regulation like a 506 offering would cost between $10,000 and $25,000, what might one expect to spend to put together that A+ offering?
So that's really interesting. Last year when Reg A+ was about a year old, I went and scraped a bunch of SEC data to see what other attorneys were charging, and it's really all across the board, right? I know my former law firm, crowdfunding lawyers, they do a flat fee of $50,000, including the annual report. But I have, at least as of last year, I've seen 2 law firms that charge their clients $500,000.
Wow.
And the interesting part about that was, like I said, all this comes down to strategy, right? those two companies that spent $500,000 in their first at least 6 months, they had only raised $500,000.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And literally, I will tell you, I've had people call me who have said, hey, I hired an attorney. I was trying to raise $5 million. He's doing a Reg A Plus for me. I was like, why are you doing a Reg A Plus for $5 million? Why? It's not even worth it, right? So what I will say, because I'm not in the Reg A Plus business anymore, I'm purely doing Reg Ds with my new software. So I say this as an unbiased person. If you're going to do a Reg A Plus, go to someone who has done it before. Go to someone who knows not just how to structure it and actually get it through, because that in itself is it's a journey, right? Mm-hmm. But go with someone who they have that knowledge, they understand your business, and they're not giving you bad advice.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. So I want to talk about now, we're talking about like, not necessarily just the little guy, but, everyone goes through their first time of raising capital, right? Or doing a syndication. And I want to talk about some of the common challenges that you see that new investors face when they're just going down that journey or down that road to putting together, whether it be a 506B or C or whatever offering structure works best for them. But what are some of the common challenges that you see new investors face when they're raising private capital, just in general?
Yeah, so actually it's not even on the legal side. I would say it's more on the actual fundraising side is, a lot of folks who are raising capital, maybe it's only their first or second time, they will try and go at it alone, which I think you can definitely do. It's just that when you do go at it alone, I think the chances or the failure rate tends to be higher. What I usually recommend to a lot of people who are trying to syndicate for the first time is, hey, if you don't have that investor base, go out, find a mentor, a coach. There's a ton of them out there. Go find a mentor, coach who works in your specific asset class. Give him a little piece of the deal and have him help you, right? Whether it's, oh my gosh, like we need to figure out how to open bank accounts, or whether it's actually bringing investors into the deal, which, strategically is a good thing because there was a lower chance of failure. But, it's okay to not do it the first time alone, right? It's okay to ask for help. And, maybe down the road, you guys get along and you do all your deals together. Maybe you graduate and you start doing deals yourself. But I usually tell people, there's a very high learning curve. And if you can make it easier on yourself, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I mean, would you say that that's a common scenario for new people to go out and find an experienced mentor, or even bring a sponsor into a first deal instead of going at it alone? I mean, would you say it's pretty common practice?
I've seen people do it, and I've seen people go it alone. So I've seen both things. It's just that the ones who go it alone are the ones that tend to be less well networked. They understand the real estate side of things, but not necessarily the fundraising side, right? Mm-hmm. And so they literally don't have access to a network of potential coaches, and they've never gone to a real estate fundraising meetup or anything like that. Those are the ones who I see are trying to go at it themselves for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it's definitely, even if you have a track record in real estate, that first fundraise that you do is still very challenging. I mean, persuading somebody to stroke a check for $50,000 or $100,000 or more, verbally, sometimes it's easy. You can get them to commit. But when it comes time to pull out the pen or go to the bank and do the wire, it's a completely different story. But I will say that after you've done your first one and you've proven your concept, you've proven your worth and your ability to perform as projected, things will get a lot easier. In fact, what I've seen is that quite often, or more often than not, the existing investors that you were able to persuade into that first deal either are an investor in your second deal, or you start working your way into their network. their buddies that they golf with or that they're at the country club with, because they're bragging about how great of a return you got for them, and everyone loves to brag about like how they're better than someone else, right? And so you'll find that they start telling their friends and their buddies and their pals about you and this opportunity and how they need to get in on the second deal that you're about to put on the table. So but it's all about that first deal is so very important. You got to get the first deal done, and you got to make it not necessarily just not a home run, that's probably not the right word for it, but it's kind of, you got to meet your projections. You got to be able to perform. So I want to talk about... Actually, Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say that brings me to another point, which is do not always be fundraising, right? Some people, for example, if they're doing a blind pool, they're like, oh, well, can I just keep it open forever? Well, first of all, there's a couple of securities regulations that you have to keep in mind. And second of all, why would you want to be fundraising forever, right? Eventually, one day, you want to be able to actually close your fund and actually go out and start actually acquiring properties and disposing of that capital. Fundraising is a full-time job. It can be very distracting. And the other thing is, it kind of works against you, because if you leave something open for a long period of time, investors are just going to think, well, I can give it to him, closer to the closing date. I don't need to give it to him now. And I think it actually makes it harder to fundraise sometimes. Sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's you bring up a good point. Why wouldn't they? It's less risky if you think about it, if they wait and see what's going to happen. I mean, if you don't have it close-ended, they could wait till you buy your first couple of properties and see if you actually perform before they commit to putting their money in. And
exactly.
We have a blind pool right now. We've got I think it's open. It'll be open for 6 months with the option to extend for 6 months, but a year at the max. And but we've just closed on our first property 3 weeks ago. We've been fundraising since the end of March, and so we've got 5 more deals in contract. So it is a full-time job though, because we've got one of my principal partners. He is 80% fundraising mode. I'm 100% acquisition mode, and then we have another partner that's 100% operational mode. So it takes a team of 3 of us and we're still just wearing a bunch of other hats on top of that, and it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work to get the capital in, but also to invest it properly, to get the deals as well. I mean, deal flow is just as challenging as raising capital, and I think I've seen some people get in trouble to a certain extent with doing a blind pool, because they raise the capital, but they focused on the capital, like you said, they put all their focus on raising the capital, but then the deal flow isn't there yet. And it takes time. I mean, deal cycles can be really long sometimes, depending where you're getting your leads from and where you're prospecting. So your investors won't be very happy if it takes 3 years for you to deploy their capital.
Yeah.
So the chance of them investing with you again goes down the longer it takes you to actually deploy their capital and start getting them some returns. And plus, you're probably accruing preferred returns and everything else, and it's just not a good scenario. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it. And so I want to talk about this is a topic that you covered, and then I want to talk about your software, about Bootstrap Legal. But first off, I want to talk about a topic that I heard you cover on another podcast recently, and it's about when you're raising private capital, whether it's a 506B, 506C, I guess it could be any of the other structures as well, but being the sponsor, the syndicator, let's talk about my example. We have a fund, we're raising capital. Is it possible to pay a referral fee for us, to pay a referral fee to someone who is not a licensed broker dealer? And for example, we've had a few of our LPs or limited partners that are currently invested with us. They've asked, hey, if I refer so-and-so, buddy, pal, friend, brother, whoever it is, and he invests with you, do you pay a referral fee? Can you pay a referral fee? What's the answer to that?
So I would probably not call it a referral fee. Okay. I would call it something else.
Okay.
So there is this concept in fundraising generally. It's called transaction-based compensation. Essentially what it means is if someone is helping you raise capital and you are paying them transaction-based compensation, which, oftentimes looks like a commission of some sort, the SEC and FINRA do not like that. You actually have to be licensed as a broker-dealer to do that. Now, having said that, there are other ways that people do get compensated for helping folks raise capital, right? So one thing that I often see, for example, is like I said, bring in a coach, bring in someone who's going to help you raise capital. Give them a little piece of the pie, right? Give them a carry or something like that. Although it should not be dependent on how much they're actually helping you raise and how much, how much investment dollars they're actually closing. Another common thing that I usually see is a consulting fee, right? So maybe you're helping make simple introductions, but you're not doing anything after that, no negotiating or whatever. Or maybe it's someone who, consults for you and just helps you develop relationships. There's a number of ways that people can get compensated, but just make sure that compensation is not tied to how much money they actually bring in.
Okay. So just a flat fee then. I mean, what have you seen to be like the norm? I mean, is there a norm in terms of what people have paid as far as this fee goes?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. I don't think there's a norm because I think it usually depends on a negotiation between the sponsor and the person who's kind of helping them raise, in terms of, how, what the expectation is, how much time they're going to spend on it, right? Sometimes these people are also providing other services as well. So it's hard to say like, oh, this is, the standard payment structure. I haven't seen a standard payment structure.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I want to talk to you about your company now, about Bootstrap Legal. I mean, it's a big topic that I want to cover, and I want to make sure that we hit on it before we wrap up the show here. So you kind of gave us the reason that you started the company, kind of the foundation it was built from, but tell us more about it. Tell us, who it's built for, who your avatar is, like who you're catering this software toward, who it's best meant for, and also what it does. I mean, exactly what it does. And assume that, I'd say probably a large percentage of those that are listening to the show have not done their first syndication. So we already know that they're expensive. We just know that lawyers are expensive, right? So anything you do through a lawyer is expensive. One of the goals with this software is to help save new syndicators money and to make it more streamlined and just have less humans involved and, which makes it less expensive for us on our end, saves us money. So talk to me about it. Tell me about Bootstrap Legal and, everything we need to know about it.
Sure. So this system is specifically designed for real estate syndicators, people doing crowdfunding campaigns, people putting together small real estate private equity funds of, a couple million or under. It's really for smaller deals. If you're raising, $10, $20, $50 million, I mean, come on, you can afford an attorney, right? It's really meant to help not just beginners, but, once in a while, a really good small deal comes across your plate and you're like, oh, too bad I can't do it because transactional cost is going to be high, or too bad I can't do it because, I'm at that level of my career where I can't take the risk of not using legal documents that would protect me, right? Like, Look, I know there's a ton of people out there who are raising capital and doing it all on a handshake agreement. To me, I think that's a little crazy because, on one hand...
or they'll just put like a standard operating agreement with an LLC and do it that way. And they'll have, truly limited partners that are passive and they'll be the acting role, and which are obviously creating a security in that manner. And but they're not necessarily doing the proper documentation to protect themselves or their investors. So I think that's very common. I think a lot of it is actually... Part of it is just ignorance. People don't know any better. And then those that do know better are just being cheap. Sorry, but that's the truth. And so your service will help those people that are just don't have the budget to go out and spend $10,000 on an attorney. Yeah, even if they really need to.
Yeah. So basically, what we do is we're trying to make it faster, cheaper, better for small transactions, right? So on the cheaper part, everything is flat fee. We undercut, what attorneys normally would charge for this type of service. So we have a basic product and premium product, and $5,000 and $7,500 respectively, depending on what package you buy, which is much less than the $10,000 to $25,000 that attorneys usually charge for this type of transaction. The other aspect, I've been in-house counsel before, and I've had to hire attorneys, and there were a number of things that drove me crazy as an attorney and having to work with other attorneys, right? So I tried to basically eliminate all the hurdles. So, when it comes to payments, I don't want you to go to the bank and stand in line to send a stupid wire. So everything, we're integrated with Stripe, and it'll take credit card, right? And so that also means, hey, if you don't have the money today, because attorneys require wires or checks, that's okay. Like, charge it to your credit card, and I hope to God that you raise your minimum investment amount, right? And also I think the really interesting feature, which I didn't think about this, but people have now come and told me this, is it's an interesting way now for people to hedge, to experiment with something new. Because if, say, they've never done a blind pool, they want to try one out, but they're not sure that their investor base will like it or will, be receptive. Hey, instead of paying $10,000 to $25,000 for an attorney, I'm going to try a small blind pool. It's only going to be $5,000 to $7,000, and look, if I raise the minimum amount, great, my investors reimburse my legal fees. But if I don't, then I'm only out 5 or 7, not 10 to 25, right? And then the other aspect of this, which I think is really important, is this. Most syndicators, when they are raising for like a single asset syndication, they have a property under contract, and they've got to raise however much it is they need to raise, in 60, 90 days.
Very short period of time.
But the problem is that, once you call the attorney and then you get engagement letter signed and you do the wire and the intake and then you wait for the attorney to manually draft it, like 2 to 6 weeks has gone by in some cases, right?
Yes.
So what my system does is it automates a lot of that a lot more quickly. So basically, someone goes in, they fill out a very adaptive questionnaire. The questions change depending on, what you answer. Once they hit the submit button, in 48 hours, they get a set of legal documents in their inbox, and it's been reviewed by a real estate syndication attorney. And I think that's really powerful. And I think 80% of the people will be able to go and use those documents and raise capital, and maybe another 20% might need some fine-tuning or some tweaking to change the documents to their particular situation. But now they've got, an extra 28 days to raise money, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point. I've honestly never had it take less than like 6 weeks. I mean, I still think maybe it can be done in 2 weeks, especially if you're doing like your second or third one. But I don't know. It's a timely process to get it honed in right, and it's just there's a lot of back and forth that takes place, the traditional route, and so nowadays in the kind of market we're currently in, I see, whereas 4 years ago you might get, you might be able to buy yourself 45 or 60 day due diligence, and then maybe even a financing contingency after that, and then a 30-day closing after that. You might be able to buy that much time, but it's such a competitive landscape that is not happening. Yeah. In fact, I was just talking to a gentleman the other day. They were buying a 400-unit property somewhere in the Atlanta metro, and the seller gave him a 20-day due diligence. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then a 30-day close after that. And I forget what the earnest money was. It was ridiculous. I'm like, I don't even want that stress. I mean, that's stress enough in itself, thinking about trying to even get due diligence accomplished on a 400-unit apartment building in 20 days, let alone even thinking about it. They had the capital, so like that wasn't one of their concerns, but things like that are happening. And to be competitive in this landscape, you've got to be able to act fast. Like, you can't have your documents take 6 weeks to get put together, because literally your time's run out by the time your PPM's ready to go. And so it sounds like you will help people avoid that potential hiccup. So, which is pretty cool. So I'm actually on your website right now. That's a really nice looking website too, Amy.
That's very thank you. I have an amazing
clean
designer.
Yeah, very very clean and easy too. And you got a video on there that'll kind of explain a little bit more about the service and the process that a client might go through. So that's awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention to our listeners about your service or about your site that you think is relevant?
Only that today the system is only able to do equity raises. So We're not yet at that stage where we're doing debt friends or anything like that. But, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to sit down, talk to them about what the system can or cannot do. And, basically today, it automates a lot of what I used to do, right? So 5/6Bs, 5/6Cs, it'll do blind pools, single asset syndication, semi-specified funds. It'll put in disclosures depending on whether you're doing public storage or mobile home parks or multifamily. So, for me as a former real estate syndication attorney, I think it's an incredibly powerful system.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So that's awesome, man. Well, congratulations on getting that launched. I know you've been working hard on getting it done, and really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing, your wisdom and your knowledge, and also information about the service that you're offering. And now I want to enter us into what I like to call the golden nugget segment of the show, Amy. And this is where I'd like it if you would, and you've already shared a ton of golden nuggets with us already, but if you had just one last huge, enormous golden nugget of advice that you feel may inspire and motivate our listeners as they progress in their real estate investing career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
I would say, just don't think too far ahead about, don't make your ultimate goal some big, monstrous dream that doesn't seem achievable. Just take small steps. The hardest part is just getting from 0 to 1, right? Mm-hmm. And after that, everything snowballs. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's real estate or whether you're starting a startup like I am, right? It's just a matter of really executing and making sure that you're not psyching yourself out in the process.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's great advice. Well, one step at a time, right? One step at a time. Exactly. Well, Amy, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And guys, to learn more about Amy and her company, you can go visit her at bootstraplegal.com. Again, that's bootstraplegal.com. And Amy, that's all we have for today. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and look forward to staying in touch with you. So you take care.
Great, thanks.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com. And we'll see you next Monday morning.